Uh, Congratulations on all of you being accepted into the program. It's very competitive. And obviously, we haven't met, but you must all be brilliant if you were accepted. And then you're facing a very big question at this moment in your life. Which architecture school should you enter? And what will that particular program offer me that will be life-changing and transformative? And will it empower me to pursue my dreams? Will I enjoy studying architecture there, meeting people from around the world, and acquire the knowledge and insight to become a future leader in the profession? I think so. As in, I think Rensselaer is the place for all of you. Anyway, I have a series of slides and themes that I'd like to share with you, because I'm fully aware of how important this decision is. And I'd like to kind of open up a very, very large door and invite all of you in to Rensselaer School of Architecture, so you get some real insight on what it would be like to study here. So here's the first slide. And that's the dean on the front lawn in front of the School of Architecture on this beautiful, beautiful Rensselaer campus. And I'm basically welcoming all the returning students back, both undergraduate and graduate students, as well as, saying hello to all these amazing new freshmen that are coming from throughout the United States and from countries around the world. And in addition to my introduction, in terms of that welcome speech, I'm challenging the students to take their education very seriously and to recognize that it has far-reaching implications. That is to say, that the knowledge they acquire can do great things in the world. Dan, the next slide. So, of course, it's a School of Architecture, and of course, we're going to provide you with an exceptional range of skill sets, and we have faculty that are brilliant in all different disciplines, and I'll talk more about that in the future. But what are we ultimately doing? That is the administration and the institute and the dean and the faculty. We're preparing you to become a future leader in the world. Now that may seem, wow, that is really, I just want to pick an architecture school and I want to get that degree and transition from high school to college and get a job and make a living. Well, you'll get all of those things, but I'm going to raise the bar really high. And I'm going to say, each one of you, although I can't see you in person yet, each one of you is brilliant and has an extraordinary amount of potential. You may not even know it. That I have any idea at the age of 17, 18 years old, that one day I would become a dean of an entire architecture school. I'll be honest with you, I didn't have a clue. All I knew is that I thought that architecture was really exciting and it was something I was gravitating towards. And I was fortunate that I went to a school that really challenged me creatively and intellectually. And from one day to the next, I saw a bigger picture of the world and a bigger picture of myself in the world. So here's an aerial view, obviously, of what could be any metropolis in the world. It's comprised of skyscrapers. This happens to be one of a number of different examples of how architecture may emerge within the public domain. Think of the millions, if not billions of people that are impacted by buildings. And a disproportionate number of the buildings that are on the planet are probably not even designed by architects. And they're certainly not designed by great architects. And when I mean by a great architect, an architect who fully recognizes the larger impact that a great building or a series of great buildings could have on communities and large and small populations of people around the world. Next slide. I think it's important to know a little bit, or at least recognize the world that you're inheriting. Not to bring the conversation down, but to underscore the fact that moving into architecture is a noble endeavor. It's a profound opportunity to give something back to the world. Think of the pollution in our cities, in our suburbs. Next. Think of climate change, which is probably, if not the most, it's certainly in the top, existential challenges in the 21st century, right? The environment as we know it has been altered due to human activity, and the ice caps are melting, and the water is rising, and the air is not as clean, and there's a depletion of energy resources, and I could go on. That's the bad news. The good news is that you and everyone in your generation has an opportunity. I would argue a responsibility, but let's just say an opportunity to make a difference, to heal the planet, to reverse what appears to be fundamentally problematic on the most profound level. And one profession among many, but certainly one of the most important, architecture, is a social and environmental project. So aside from the fact that you may actually at this moment find it really interesting to design a building and to express yourself, and all those things are absolutely fantastic, think for a moment about something that's bigger than yourself, which is that if you design a building that can respond to climate change, and it's about a sustainable proposition, a practice, and those buildings are beautiful and they inspire people to want to move through them, to live in them, to visit them, you will have been giving something back to society. And I can't think of something more exciting and satisfying than knowing that every day and every hour that you spend in an architecture school on your studies, you're essentially developing your voice. You're learning these skill sets and you're acquiring this vast amount of knowledge, again, in order to, at the proper time, do something remarkable and memorable in the world. Next. So think of architecture as contributing to the next planetary strategy. I'm not proposing that you'll sit in a castle among the most powerful people in the world and create that strategy, but the architectural community is very, very interconnected around the world. And they're very conscious of at all ages, all walks of life, in every professional and academic environment, about the importance of a sustainable practice, about the importance of providing an educational experience in college that provides the wealth of knowledge in order to be how should I say, a kind of active and impactful citizen in the 21st century. Next. And when I talk about a new planetary strategy, uh, it's like a call for action. It's like, what can I do? I just got out of high school. I'm going into college. Why so much responsibility on my shoulders? It's not something that you have to do. You'll be part of a community of fellow young architects at Rensselaer, and we collectively feel strongly about this. We collectively recognize that we can bring happiness and pleasure and beauty into the world, and that we can clean our environment, and we can maximize the energy capacity of the technology that we assign to our buildings. And we can think in the most new and novel ways about buildings and cities and infrastructure that is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ahead of its time. That's another thing. Think of going to a school where you can dream about what the planet and what architecture will look like decades from now, and be provided with the knowledge to be able to realize that. To me, that's extraordinary. Next. And architecture, it's an interdisciplinary proposition. It's indoors, it's outdoors, it's small buildings, it's large skyscrapers, right? It's retrofit, it's public spaces. The image on the left is the High Line in New York City. This is an abandoned, train track, elevated train track on the West Side Highway. And architects, landscape architects, environmentalists, they all work together in a collaborative team to design an outdoor, public, accessible environment that required an interdisciplinary mindset to be able to pull it off. I suppose I show these slides because I want you to understand that we all may have a preconception when we're younger about what architecture is. And the fact is, it's so much more. And the education that you get in architecture will allow you to move into a variety of areas that are not directly about designing a building. Another way of putting it is that you'll not only be able to open up conversations with leaders in allied fields, but you'll be able to change and modify your professional career destiny for many, many decades to come, because you have this beautiful, expansive mind. Next. So making a difference in your lifetime. You're thinking, well, what are these images? Well, two of the images are about landing on the moon, which, it happened when I was a very small kid. And now we're sending robots to Mars. I think it's emblematic of the fact that if you dream something and you take it seriously, it will become real. That the assumption that reality and fiction are fundamentally oppositional, that they don't live in the same world. I would argue, on the contrary, that fiction and fantasy is about imagining something that hasn't become realized yet. The two color images actually come from a great 1960s architecture firm called Archigram. And this would require an entire lecture. They simply look like kind of personal doodles of sorts, but there's an enormous wealth of knowledge and concepts and skill sets and planetary strategies built into those drawings. Next. This would be a small detail, close-up, of what you may have found in those other portraits. Why am I showing that? It's really more of a kind of conceptual idea that you can make a difference in your lifetime. And you may not know how that's going to materialize and where you're going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now. And that's the beauty of living. That's the beauty of being young, about going to college, taking risks, experimenting, making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, and just growing from one year to the next to become the person that you were meant to be. Next slide. So this is really important. You're going to have to make a decision about which architecture school that you want to go to. And I would say use your intuition. Don't get caught up in the metrics, because metrics don't mean a lot, like data. You're hearing from the dean, and you'll hear from students in the school. And some of you may have walked around campus and even had the opportunity to look at our influx book. And if you don't have it, we can send it to you. We have a digital flip book, which I'll talk about a little later, but it's a beautiful overview of 8 to 10 years of student work. But you're going to have to compare these schools. And if just for a moment you take the cost of the school away, just for a moment, a superior education is invaluable. It's one of the great things that you can acquire in your life. If your mind expands and you see more, then it opens up greater opportunity for you throughout your life. It provides you a network of classmates, of professionals, of friends, of people around the planet. And it will put you in a position, a really, really strong position, to become a significantly important architect in years to come. So, the emphasis here is on superior education. And I would, again, longer discussion here. Let's put the price tag back. Rensselaer is not an inexpensive institution. And I am fully aware of the financial burden, certainly responsibility your parents have to be able to put their son and daughter through college. And I applaud you for your efforts and dealing with balancing the finances in order that your son and daughter can go to a great school like Rensselaer. The one thing I would say is that it's such a powerful and meaningful investment. That is to say, if you spend a little bit more money going to a far superior institution, I guarantee you that your son and daughter, and in this case, I'm speaking to those that have been accepted, you guys, you will have had an experience of a lifetime here. And you will be fully compensated throughout your lifetime in architecture because of that superior education. It puts you in a totally different domain. So it is about maximizing your full creative and intellectual potential. We're here to do everything we possibly can to get you excited and inspired about learning about architecture. That's our responsibility. And I said this before, one of the great things about architecture compared to other disciplines or professions is that it's incredibly broad. You don't have to be great in everything at all, because when you work in an office, you're always working in a team collaborative organization. There are certain professions where you become, let's say, you target a very, very specific skill set, and you may become great at that but you're only doing one thing. My God, in architecture, you're learning how to work with digital software. You're learning about structures and how buildings stand up, the physics and forces in the world. You're learning how material behaves, energy systems. You're learning that the path of the sun has a tremendous influence on the experience inside buildings in terms of natural and artificial lighting. You're learning about the program that underlies a building, whether it's a school, a library, a museum, a shelter, a rapid deployment structure to save people's lives, right? I mean, I could go on, code analysis, history and theory, right? I mean, there must be 10, 20, 30, 40 related disciplines inside architecture. So if you're interested in being challenged, if you love the idea that the world is made out of a puzzle of different components and each of them inform each other in a different way, architecture is like a library, an alphabet of concepts. And that's amazing because as you continue to grow and become more curious, there's only more knowledge to acquire. Developing an elastic mind. Many of you may play sports and you understand the analogy here about kind of flexing and becoming, let's say, more versatile in a sport, more facile, more able to do things. Well, you come to Rensselaer School of Architecture, and I promise you, you will develop a critical mind, which means that when you're faced with a problem or a challenge, and it doesn't necessarily have to be architecture, anything, any challenge in life, because you have an elastic mind, because you're comfortable creatively to figure out how to overcome problems in novel ways, you'll come up with a new solution. The world is constantly changing, and so is the profession. 10, 15, 20 years from now, the challenges will be fundamentally different than they were today. And if you've had a superior education with an elastic mind, it won't be a problem for you. And you'll be one of the leaders in the profession, being able to take on those challenges and find an extraordinary amount of satisfaction coming up with wonderful solutions. Becoming a lifelong learner. You know, one assumes, if I were to share with you a kind of preconception, well, you learn in school and then you go and you take that knowledge and you apply it in the world outside of school. Well, why couldn't your entire life be about learning and taking that knowledge and applying it all the time so that you don't get bored, so that your relation to the world and your experiences, you don't have any preconceptions. In other words, oh, I've done that before. You don't want a life where it's repetitive. You want to design your life like you would design a building, and we'll provide you with all the skill sets and knowledge to be able to do that. Next. Many schools of architecture will make very strong statements. Architecture is an art, and that's the way we teach it. Or architecture, it's a science, or it's just about technology. I think it's deeply unfortunate to think of architecture as having any kind of singular definition. As I've described throughout the presentation, it's extremely expansive, and it's a combination of art, science, and technology. And how cool is that, right? First of all, it is about promoting individual expression. Each of you has a creative identity. each of you has a voice inside you like no other voice in the history of the world. And it's our responsibility, and actually it's yours, to figure out how to get that voice out there. So we teach architecture as a form of integrated knowledge. We have engineers. We have social scientists. We have entrepreneurs, business, I should say it, leaders, people who understand engineering and material behavior. I could give you a long list of all the people that either teach in the school or come to the school at critical moments and participate in a conversation around your projects in order to help you to understand, again, the full potential of that project and how it behaves in a variety of ways. We have an extraordinary amount of technology in the school. Fabrication platforms. We 3D print buildings at various scales. We have laser cutting machines. We have a robot. And we have a ton of software with great teachers. So within a matter of weeks and months, you'll be able to draw on the computer and make things you couldn't possibly think could happen, right? And this is really important. We imagine buildings of the future as being smart. And when I say smart, a real smart building knows how to change in real time because the sun's gone down and they're not going to get more energy from the sun until the next morning. A real smart building will be able to change its shape because of the temperature outside or because of the wind. A building will be able to change in real time because of the total number of occupants within the spaces. That's a smart building. How many smart buildings do we, all of us, actually have the opportunity to acquire access to on a daily level? Probably none. And why is that? Because the next smart building of the 21st century still needs to be designed and still needs to be fabricated and deployed in spaces and villages and towns and cities all over the world. You guys could do that. And imagine buildings as being beautiful, being so beautiful that you want to buy them, you want to own them, you want to walk through them, you want to visit them, you want to share them, you want to give them to others. You want to change the lives of people through smart and beautiful buildings. Next. I'm not going to go into the details of each of these projects, but one of the takeaways is that this is student work. These students never had any architectural background. These students are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. Maybe a few of them, a small selection, entered into our career discovery program in the summer for 2 weeks. But for the most part, we taught them how to draw with the software, how to build models, how to think of architecture as equivalent to a spoken or written language, how to consider the assignment of materials, the lighting, the shape in relation to its context, its energy systems, its structural performance. I mean, I could go on, right? And so I'm very proud of the drawings, the renderings, and the models that you're looking at, because this is only a small selection of student work at Rensselaer. Next. And here's some more. And some of these, again, longer discussion here, some of these may look like a building you've seen before, or maybe not. That's okay. That's why you want to get an education, right? That's why you want to learn a new language. That's why you want to be around brilliant fellow students from around the world with great, great teachers, because you want to find out how to do that and what it means. Next. Every school of architecture in the United States, and I would say most architecture offices, recognize that we're dealing with climate change, something I spoke about earlier in the presentation. And they recognize that the buildings have to be designed to be more sustainable, to be more energy efficient. And they do that by specifying existing technology that's in the building sector. It's it's in the market. It's on the shelf. And if you specify it and you use those components and systems, the building, will be very reasonably responsive to the environment. But when you think about it, let's step back for a second. Some of the most extraordinary technological innovation traditionally takes place in the aerospace industry and in the military complex, and unfortunately not in the building industry. There's a lot of reasons for that. But if that's the case, then it means that the technology that is available around the world today isn't as sophisticated, isn't as smart and responsive and high performing as it could be. Well, how are we going to change that? Well, we have a graduate program in New York City. It's actually located in Industry City in Brooklyn, and it's called the Center for Architecture, Science, and Ecology, CASE. And our undergraduate students in RPI can actually spend a full semester at CASE in New York City working alongside the graduate students on this incredibly sophisticated building technology that might be 5, 10, 25, 30 years ahead of its time. Now, that would be a significant difference in terms of an experience between coming to Rensselaer School of Architecture or going to another school. You might not get next generation building technology there. And I spoke to you earlier about a definition of smart buildings. And here's another one: a sentient buildings adapting in real time like plants and animals. And I think it's a beautiful analogy, right? Living creatures, species, animals, insects of all types are really, really well designed. And they're able to adapt to changes in the environment. And although buildings aren't literally alive, they certainly are becoming more so in the 21st century than they were in the previous century. And the larger aspirational goal here is that buildings would finally be off the grid and they wouldn't need fossil fuel. And between wind power and water and air and sun, they would be these beautiful perpetual machines that on some level live forever with the right care and love and appreciation. If you come to Rensselaer School of Architecture, you will be in the forefront of this profession, and it'll be something that you care deeply about, and you will in fact know how to design a building to be able to respond in the most exceptional way to the challenges that we're facing in the 21st century. Next, Dan. Let's talk about global citizenship. I started off the presentation about preparing all of you to become a future leader. When I was your age, although I grew up in New Jersey and spent a lot of time in New York City, and I would visit Canada every once in a while. We had relatives there. I never had the opportunity to go to Europe or to Asia or to Latin America at an early age. I had to wait years later to be able to do that. And now I travel a lot as both an architect and the dean of the school. And I have an extraordinary amount of appreciation for the range of cultures around the world. It's an amazing thing to be a human being and to know that although we're kind of all the same, we're so different in terms of culture and ethnic backgrounds and religious backgrounds and gender, identities. I mean, all of those differences is what makes up this beautiful multicultural planet. And if you're an architect, you'll be getting jobs around the world. You won't, if you live in New York, you won't only have your commissions in New York. They'll be in San Francisco, they'll be in Paris, they'll be in Tokyo, they'll be in Montreal. And how cool is it that at an early age, 18, 19, 20 years old, you can spend a full semester abroad in Rensselaer's study abroad program in Italy, India, China, Argentina, Chile, and Japan. And you'll be collaborating with students in those host schools. You'll be visiting historical and contemporary architecture. And you'll be learning about things that you had no idea about. And you'll take a big sigh after 3-4 months away, come back and go, whoa, that was amazing. And it'll give you a greater appreciation for your homeland and where you did grow up, and for your parents' support throughout your entire life. It's a really, really important part of our program. I don't think there's another architecture school in the United States that offers as many cultural immersion experiences as you'll get at Rensselaer's School of Architecture. And after graduating, who knows, you may get a job in Barcelona, in Moscow, in Madrid, and work for one of the best architects in the world and learn a second, a third, a fourth language. And come home and start your practice in the States, but visit these other parts of the world and work in these other parts of the world and establish a global, professional, and even personal network. That's a vision I have for you. And I can tell you that so many of our students, 75% of the students in the School of Architecture at Rensselaer, have had a study abroad experience. Next, community engagement. You heard me speak about architecture. It is about personal expression, but it's also about helping others. And certainly community engagement is about saying, how can architecture do something transformative? Well, here's a list. I won't be able to go through all of them, but in much detail, but we have a design build partnership with Habitat for Humanity in downtown Troy. We're helping marginalized communities, retrofitting existing buildings, and then designing new housing structures from ground up. We're very proud of that. It's going into its second year, and we expect to be able to see buildings designed by our students within the next 12 to 24 months. The Capital Region Initiative, which is one example, is in these two images. We've established partnerships with cultural institutions throughout New York State, and they often want to expand their campus, another building. And would our students come up with some ideas about that? And of course they do, and they're amazing ideas. And that means that the students in my school are able to educate the leadership of these organizations to think about architecture in ways they hadn't even thought were possible. We just launched a new program with the City of Chicago's planning department. We're going to have semester-away internship opportunities for our students. They'll spend a full semester, either in the fall for 4 months or in the spring and the summer combined, 7 months working either in an office anywhere in the world, or in this case, with the planning department in Chicago, learning about the design and all the issues that underlie the making of a great American city. Rise High, this is a community outreach initiative through students K through 12. We have 2 student organizations in the School of Architecture that are both committed to informing or raising awareness to younger students, K through 12, about architecture as a future career. And they give of their time for free in workshops. So we're very proud of that. Why don't we move to the next slide? I'll show you something not on this list, but we were approached by an entrepreneur who was making a custom interlocking modular bottle, plastic. You could fill it with liquid, and after you finish drinking it, you could literally build a structure, putting them all together, which we did. His larger ambition here is to create a rapid deployment structure. So in cases of natural or man-made disasters, you could fly this bottle system, again, as a modular packing strategy, anywhere in the world and put together a shelter in a short period of time. Just another example of how design can be used to help communities, right? And yet the details, the science, the engineering, the aesthetics of its assembly all participate in the genesis of this work. Next slide. This was a project led by one of our faculty. She was born in Ghana, Africa, and she actually got her PhD at Case, and now she's running our building science program, Maylene Loco. And by the way, all of you are interested in either a Bachelor's of Architecture degree or a building science degree. Both of them are brilliant. Maylene oversees the building science program, and basically she realized that coconut husks, after the coconut on the inside is being used, it's just discarded. And it has no intrinsic value in the world. And so she thought, well, could we recycle the coconut husk into a building component and actually create structures out of it? And the answer is yes. So there was a big event in Ghana where Rensselaer School of Architecture was invited to install an installation, and there were thousands, tens of thousands of people who moved through this area. And so although this was shown as an installation, she's developing it as a serious building product that could create a whole industry that never existed before. I think the takeaway is using architecture as a productive tool for social change, right? And what a perfect example of how design, science, technology, a business plan, an entrepreneurial agenda to do something good in the world can drive a creative activity out back into the world and change it in a positive way. Next. So here's some school highlights, and I could the list here could go on for a long period of time. Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson, one of the most brilliant individuals I've ever met. She's the president of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. She has been for over a couple of decades. And why is that important? Because the entire university is run by someone who asks the question, what is the proper education for the 21st century? How do we prepare our students to become future leaders? And at some moment, will they be prepared to change the world? And each of the deans, and now I'm speaking for the School of Architecture, has to decide how to interpret that charge in our own way. And we have. The Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center, it's called MPAC. That is the building on the left. It's a $250 million building. And the image on the right is inside one of the research rooms. I've never, and I know all the schools of architecture around the world. I don't know of one that has this kind of technological platform available to it. So all our lectures pre-pandemic were inside that space. We've had major research workshops and symposia. Lots of things take place inside MPAC throughout the entire institute. It's like a living laboratory. And that's important. It's one thing to talk about an aspirational goal. It's another thing to be able to have the opportunity with the support of the institute to research it, to implement that idea. And MPAC has been invaluable to us. I have some of the most intellectually and creatively diverse faculty from around the world that you can possibly imagine. If you go online, you can find their names. Their work is in permanent collections and museums. They've written books. They lecture around the world. They've built buildings. They have won awards as educators. It goes on. And I take my job as the dean very seriously, and I only want the best for our students, and I think we have them. I mentioned to you earlier that 75% of our students in the School of Architecture have had a cultural immersion experience. Again, I'm very proud of that. It's not a requirement. It was a choice on their part, but they recognized that it was important to them. And if you were to speak to any of them today or on another occasion, I'm sure they'd be thrilled to share with you how that has impacted their life. 60% of the students in the School of Architecture are female. Another accomplishment, I think that's wonderful. I think schools have to reflect the world at large. And although you may find in STEM institutions, engineering universities are typically, the enrollment favors men, I love the idea that in the School of Architecture, there's female power. And I think that's good for the women, and I think it's good for the men. Next. There is a organization called Design Intelligence that ranks schools of architecture around the United States. Before I came to Rensselaer, it hadn't been ranked. It was never ranked. In 2009, we shot up one of the fastest ranked schools in terms of moving from 20 to 19 to 17 to 14 to 13. It's a popularity contest. If you asked me if I had to compare my school with any school in the United States, I'd say it's in the top 2 or 3, without a question. But it's a popularity contest because the people who determine the ranking are the alum. And if you have a really, really, really large body group of alumni over decades and decades and decades, they will vote for their alma mater and you will move up in the rankings. So I don't really think it reflects the truth down on the ground. But it's important to get high rankings. I take it very seriously. And the highest we were ranked is 13th. I think we're 14th. Once the pandemic hit, they suspended the rankings. But again, I would say you don't pick a school by number. you pick a school intuitively that you feel is the right place for you to go, that the dean has said something that resonates with me. I could be happy there. I could learn a lot. They're going to set me in a fantastic, put me in a great place to be successful in my lifetime. That same organization, Design Intelligence, will recognize uh, teachers, academic leaders, as being the top educators in the country. I've been very fortunate that this has taken place for me 3 times in the last 5 or 6 years. So obviously, my love for architectural education, for architecture, the seriousness and commitment I have to empowering students is known by others and has gotten, around the United States. And so I'm very proud of that recognition. The Bedford Chair is an endowment that we received from an alum who thought it was really important that architects and structural engineers collaborate together while in school. Well, they certainly will collaborate once you get into an office. So we have the opportunity to bring in a world-class structural engineer into the school that teaches a seminar comprised of half civil engineering students and half architecture students. And then in the summer, they all expenses trip paid to go anywhere in the world that the instructor would like to go to see structures up close, in person, in real time. So they'll go to, Brazil, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, France, Italy, and they have. So our students love this. And it's very much about our commitment to interdisciplinary collaboration. The Brown's Traveling Fellowship is also an endowment that's provided to a group of students every year to travel anywhere in the world. They get $5,000. They have to put together a really compelling application and travel proposal. Why would they want to visit Baroque churches in the south part of Germany, or skyscrapers in major metropolis cities in Asia? How will it impact and influence their insight on architecture? Anyway, it's a wonderful opportunity, in addition to the study abroad programs, to be able to see the world and to learn from it. The Crave Lab, in addition to MPAC, the image on the left is the concert hall inside MPAC, the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center I mentioned earlier. It seats 12 to 1,400 people. The acoustics is out of this world. The image on the right is Crave Lab, and it's a standalone space in our technology park, and it's a 360-degree panoramic screen. And so that means students in our undergraduate and graduate programs are able to use the Crave Lab to develop a design project. And you can literally be inside the buildings and cities that you designed. And it has 28 projectors and 130 speakers. I mean, it's an incredible experience. So if any of you are interested in video games and VR technology, we have that times 1,000 at RPI. Next. And this is the last slide of the presentation. The first 2 items, I just want to call attention to an organization, the most important architecture organization for a professional architect in the United States is the American Institute of Architects, AIA. And they award 1 gold medal to a single architect every year for exceptional work, and 1 firm award to an architecture firm in the United States for exceptional work. The firm award 2 years ago, Payet, Jim Collins, class of 1977, won it, his firm in Boston. And about 3 to 4 years ago, Stephen Ehrlich from EYRC, class of 68, won the firm award. These are like Academy Awards in architecture. So this small architecture program in upstate New York has these superstar architects. It tells you a lot about the legacy of our school. And then, of course, the gold medal is for a single architect, and Peter Bolin, who's part of Bolin, Sawinski, and Jackson. And Peter Bolin, if you don't know, he designed the first Apple store for the late Steve Jobs. And he designed 10,000 Apple stores after that. So these are powerhouses. And I only bring that up because I'm sure when they were your age, they had no idea what their life would be like 30, 40 years later. And so once again, here's an example of a great education, a brilliant young person taking their education seriously, falling in love with architecture and doing great buildings for many, many years and being rewarded for it. I mentioned this earlier. We have an all-school book. The first one was Influx 1. The second one was Influx 2. If you come on campus, I'd be able to give you the Influx 1 in person. That's a 632-page book. The second one is 932 pages. It's being printed as we speak, and I hope to have it by April. But we do have a digital flip book. It's the exact same book, just as a digital file. And we can get you the link, and you can download the book, and you can see hundreds, if not a few thousand images of student work in the school. And I don't think there's a book that is as beautiful and as comprehensive and as forward-thinking from any school of architecture in the U.S. All of our students receive amazing offers from architecture firms. And you might know by now that we have a all-institute initiative called ARCH, where you then, after your junior year, you take a full semester off in either the fall or spring, and you work in a firm. Well, we're putting together an amazing menu of options for our students. So that experience will be life-changing. You'll have more practical experience while you're in our school. And when you're ready to graduate, you will have all this knowledge, practical and theoretical, you'll be able to put together. Not every school of architecture offers internships and co-ops with this length of duration. And finally, there's an amazingly strong alumni network. It's a real family. These are people who love their alma mater and would be happy to either hire you or to serve as mentors or to help you out in any way. The purpose of any great school is to educate the next generation of students. And you can just see on their faces that they're excited, they're passionate, they're having a blast being in college. And again, if I could put them in front of you right now, they would tell you stories from the heart, how their experience at Rensselaer has been just extraordinary and life-changing. That's my presentation. I hope it's been insightful. I'm certainly, I'll make myself available to answer any questions now.